Debate, the honourable member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and it's an absolute honour for me to stand on behalf of the residents of Davenport and speak on this bill, which is C-24, an act to amend the Salaries Act and to make a consequential amendment to the Financial Administration Act. And because it probably will be one of my last times to actually address this House, I also want to wish everybody in the House a happy holiday, very Merry Christmas, or whatever way that they celebrate this wonderful holiday season. So that's to all of you. So what is this bill? And that's for those who are watching at home, and whether it's now or in the future, I want to make sure that everybody's clear on what it is that I'm talking about. The changes that are being proposed to the Salaries Act will formalize the equality of all members of Cabinet and modernize the Act to allow for more flexibility. The current Act, Madam Speaker, allows for 35 Cabinet positions, including the position of the Prime Minister. What this bill will do is it will amend the Act to include 5 additional titled Cabinet positions, and they are the following: Minister of La Francophonie, Minister of Small Business and Tourism, Minister of Science, Minister of Status of Women, and Minister of Sport and Persons with Disability. It also adds 3 new untitled positions to provide flexibility to structure future ministries to reflect the priorities of the government without resorting to Minister of State appointments. These changes, Madam Speaker, will not impact the Ministries and Minister of State Act. Minister of State appointments will remain an option at the discretion of the Prime Minister. And as the Minister of Employment mentioned a little bit earlier, and I want to reinstate, allowing us to make these changes actually provides flexibility for the current and future governments to be able to appoint ministers to various positions depending on the priorities of the government of the day. And so why are we doing this? We want to make sure that there is only one tiered cabinet, so we don't have a tier of two tiers for cabinet ministers. We want to make sure that we only have one tier. We don't have a senior cabinet minister and a junior cabinet minister. Everybody within our cabinet is at the same level. So no junior or senior ministers. There's just ministers who are working very hard to deliver results for all Canadians. We also want to make sure that we're updating the Salaries Act to modernize, in addition to formally equalizing the status of the government's ministerial team. We also want to, Madam Speaker, we want to recognize the equality of cabinet members, and this allows us to do so. And then I had mentioned that there were, under this act, we're going to be adding 5 additional positions. And maybe I want to speak specifically to one of them more directly. I'm very proud that we do have a Minister of Small Business and Tourism. I know this is something of great importance great importance to Davenport residents. We're very proud that we're putting a huge emphasis on small businesses. We're very proud of the fact that we're actually reducing the small business tax from 11% to 9%. So it's moving to 10% as of the beginning of January 2018, and then it'll move to 9% at the beginning of 2019. So we're very proud about that and all the support we're providing to small businesses. And in addition, also wonderful emphasis on tourism as well. And just last week, Madam Speaker, I was very, very proud to actually attend the Canadian Tourism Awards. And actually, a group within my riding, Sesqui, actually won one of the Canadian Tourism Awards. And so I was very proud to be able to be there to honor them. The Minister of Small Business and Tourism was there as well. And I just want to give out a shout out to both Joanne Lowton and Andrea Stewart of Sesqui, who won a Canadian Tourism Award. So very proud of them. And maybe one of the last things I want to mention, and I know our Minister of Employment mentioned this as well, and I think it's important for me to also highlight the fact that our government has a very strong feminist agenda. One of the first acts, as everybody knows, of what we did when we came into office is to put into place a gender equal cabinet. We're all very proud of that. This bill is actually going to help formally equalize all the positions within that cabinet. But I'm also very proud of some of the additional steps that we've actually taken. One of the other steps we've taken is that we've added a gender lens into our budget process. First time in Canadian history that actually was done in our budget 2017. And I know that our Minister of Finance is stepping it up and has actually started consultations with a number of groups. And I actually was at one of the consultations in Toronto to say, what is the next level in addition to the gender lens? How can we do better in Budget 2018? So I was very proud that I was part of those discussions that took place in Toronto less than 2 weeks ago. And just so people know, by adding a gender lens into the budget process, what essentially we're doing is we are asking every department to actually put on a gender lens whenever it is that they're making proposals for Budget 2018. And I know one of the statements that our Minister of Finance indicated during our consultation with a number of groups in Toronto was that he actually has told every single cabinet member that they should only be coming with proposals for Budget 2018 if they've actually applied a gender lens. And I actually very much appreciate the importance that he's put onto gender budget lens moving forward. I very much appreciate that he has met with a number of feminist organizations and organizations that very much work on issues affecting women and girls, both in Canada and abroad. And I think that our 2018 budget will be the stronger for it. I also want to talk for a minute about pay equity legislation, because I was sitting in the House, Madam Speaker, and I was listening to some of the questions, and I know that there is great anxiety, and I think it is very well placed, about the fact that we still do not have pay equity in this country. I was very blessed about a year ago to be asked to join the special committee looking at pay equity legislation at the federal level. We unfortunately did not have pay equity legislation at the national level. We put a committee into place to look into it, and so we actually made some very strong recommendations. And actually, if you look at the title of that report, Madam Speaker, the title of the report is actually Action Now. And so I know that the Minister of Employment is about to introduce pay equity legislation at the national level. I very much look forward to that. I know it's very much based on the very hard work that the committee made, and all other groups and all other advocates that have been pushing for this for a very long time. And it is way past the time that we should be addressing this issue, and I will be very happy when that actually comes into place. Personally, I am also trying to see what more I can do in terms of just larger society around how is it that as a national government we can help to ensure more women get into senior leadership roles, both not only in politics but also in business, in addition to ensuring that we do everything we can to close the gap around pay equity outside of the federal government system. So we have done a lot of really great things, Madam Speaker. I know that we have a lot more steps to go, a lot more way to go, but we are making progress, and I think we should be very proud of the steps that we've taken. And I want to mention a couple of other things, Madam Chair, in terms of our feminist agenda that I'm very proud of. I know that our Minister of Foreign Affairs and our Minister of International Development and our Minister of International Trade have all talked about how they've incorporated the feminist agenda into each of their portfolios. I know for our Minister of International Development, she's incorporated in terms of the emphasis that we are making in terms of the dollars that we're giving to organizations abroad, and it's very much focused on women and girls around the world. And I know that there's a particular emphasis as well in some of the humanitarian assistance that we're actually giving in the Rohingya state and the situation that's actually happening outside of Myanmar right now. I know that our Minister of International Trade would say that he is very proud that we actually have a gender equity chapter that is part of the Canada-Chile trade agreement. It was a historic agreement from that perspective, and I know that that set the stage for more of these types of chapters to be added to future trade agreements as we move along. And then lastly, our Minister of Foreign Affairs was very proud when she stood and indicated to the world, to Canadians, to all of us, that that she wanted Canada, and she's promoting Canada to take on a very strong role to ensure that we have more female peacekeepers in the world. We think that it'll be the next way that Canada can take a leadership role in terms of peacekeeping the world by adding more women. And I see that my time has actually ended, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank you and thank this House for allowing me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the residents of Davenport. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleague for her comments. And many times today, the government has referred to gender equity or equality and gender parity in cabinet. But, Madam Speaker, the expert that appeared before this committee clearly pointed out that there is no substance to that fact in terms of this bill. She says, quote, really, there's no gender substance, no equity substance on the basis of gender equality to this legislation, referring to C-24. In fact, she went further than that, Madam Speaker. In response to a question about whether the Prime Minister's claim of a gender-equal cabinet was cynical, she went beyond that and she said, quote, I would say it's dishonest. So, Madam Speaker, how can my colleagues continue to argue about this fact that it's causing gender equity in the cabinet when clearly there's no such thing? That's what Gerald said.
Honourable member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for his question. I would mention two things. One is the core, at the very heart of what we're trying to do with this bill is just to create a one-tiered cabinet. So that's the first point I want to make. The other thing I would say to you is I've been very blessed this year to be able to go to the doors and to speak to a lot of residents of Davenport. And I can honestly tell you that from a perception perspective, they are so proud. They are so proud that we have a gender equal cabinet. It's something for young girls and young women to aspire to, for those who actually want to get into politics, that they feel that they can actually step into one of these roles. And to see all the beautiful female leaders and cabinet ministers that are in our cabinet, it's something for them to aspire to. And I do think that it's something that is a wonderful accomplishment for our government.
Well,
thank you.
That's the honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Madam Speaker. Well, in fact, it isn't a gender equitable cabinet. I don't understand why, Madam Speaker, the members keep saying this when even the experts, their own officials, are saying they do not deliver that. But, Madam Speaker, what concerns me the most is this government has been in power for 2 years. It was in 2004 when the Pay Equity Task Force called for action on equal pay for work of equal value in the federal civil service. And yet again, this is the answer to everything. It's the answer to Indigenous children having access to comparable services, to Indigenous communities having access to safe drinking water. The answer for this government always is, eventually, you will have equal rights.
A member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for her question. I'll mention two things. So, one, I truly do believe we have a gender equal cabinet. The position of the Minister of the Status of Women, to me, is equal to that of the Minister of International Trade. Right. It is what this bill is trying to do. It is at the very core of what this bill is. So that is point number one. In terms of pay equity, I can assure you, as someone who was actually part of the committee that looked at this, I am very passionate about, again, look at the title of that report. It was about action now. Our government is trying to move as quickly as possible. Would I like it to move a little bit more quickly in terms of introducing this legislation? Absolutely. I'm sure we all would, but I know it's about to come. I know that we're going to be able to put it into place, and I believe it's going to be a piece of legislation that we're all going to be very proud of. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Comments, questions, commentaires. The honourable member for Perth Wellington.
Madam Speaker. Now, the member from Davenport just said that she sees the Minister of Status of Women to be equal to the Minister of International Trade. Yet, if you look at the order in Council appointing the Minister of the Status of Women, it says to assist the Minister of Canadian Heritage in carrying out of that minister's responsibilities. So simply calling a minister without actually changing the enabling legislation or the Financial Administration Act does not put that person at the level of a minister or the departmental apparatus of a minister. So will the member from Davenport correct her statement to reflect that fact?
The honourable member for Davenport has a brief answer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for his question. I would make a couple points. I think that the point that he mentioned was it's only one part of her job. I would say to you that she is the leader, the leading voice of gender equity within our cabinet, within our caucus, and so I think that from a leadership perspective, she's absolutely at the equal level as all other cabinet ministers. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
Resume.